To all of you following me on YouTube, first of all, thank you for subscribing to my channel and for your interest in my content. I greatly appreciate it. And I've been posting mostly on my YouTube channel. I've been primarily posting interviews that people have conducted with me, sometimes interviews that I conduct with other people, and I plan to do a lot more of that. But I've been very busy behind the scenes working to create content for my members community, the alberinoanalysis.com, and I want to give you a sample of that content here today. I decided to record a video in my private briefing series in my members community addressing a topic that always comes up whenever I talk about aliens or UFOs or disclosure or David Grush or anything to do with ufology. Invariably, inevitably, people will cite Project Bluebeam. I hope you enjoy the following sample from a private briefing. The entirety of the video is available right now in my members community. Ladies and gentlemen, today is the 31st of July, 2024, and in this briefing, I would like to discuss a topic that comes up a lot whenever I discuss the alien presence. And of course, I'm referring to Project Bluebeam. And I'm sure all of you have heard of this or have seen people on social media and on YouTube posting and talking about Project Bluebeam. And some of you know exactly what Project Bluebeam is, and others are unaware of this conspiracy theory. So I would like to very briefly discuss Project Bluebeam and give you my thoughts on this prevailing topic, again, that is going to show up every time somebody mentions anything about aliens or UFOs or alien abduction. Invariably, somebody is going to mention Project Bluebeam. So let's do a very quick summarization of Project Bluebeam and understand that this conspiracy theory has several iterations. It's not exactly one thing. I mean, there's a general idea here, but there are various iterations of the theory. So in brief, Project Bluebeam proposes that the powers that be, i.e. NASA, the United Nations, the Pentagon, the military-industrial complex, the CIA, the Illuminati, etc., plan to deploy a secret advanced technology to simulate an alien invasion and or a false rapture or even a false second coming of Christ. And the theory goes that they're going to deploy specifically a exceedingly advanced holographic technology that projects images into the sky, hence the denomination Bluebeam. So again, the idea is that some secret government organization or some globalist organization or some agency in the intelligence community, again, take your pick, is going to deploy a technology, probably holographic, to simulate an alien invasion, a false rapture, or a false second advent, a false return of Christ. And this is not new. This conspiracy goes back to the 90s, for sure. But it's gained a lot of momentum recently, especially because of the, as I always say, the tacit admission by our government that the UFO phenomenon is real and indeed constitutes, at least to some degree, a non-human intelligence. And so people are always injecting Project Bluebeam into the conversation. And we'll talk about why at the end. There's a couple of reasons why a lot of people tend to believe that this is going to happen. One of the primary pieces of evidence that you see people brandishing in support of this theory is Ronald Reagan, a speech that Ronald Reagan gave, in which he cites a potential alien invasion. But it's important to understand the context of this speech. Ronald Reagan was talking about Russia, was talking about communism, and we were in the Cold War. And so Ronald Reagan was giving a speech, and he was, as a thought experiment, he was wondering what sort of thing could unite us, could bring us together, even in the midst of the Cold War. And I'll quote you, I'll cite a portion of the speech in which Reagan invokes an alien invasion. He says the following, quote, "Can we and all nations not live in peace? In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bond. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?" So obviously Reagan is using the word alien here as a metaphor for war and the threat of war and the disruption of peace. It's kind of a clumsy metaphor, but I think it's important to put this in context. We're in the midst of the Cold War here when Reagan makes this speech, and don't forget that Reagan launched the Star Wars program, a program which was ostensibly in which we were going to weaponize space, and this was a grave threat to the Soviet Union, and the objective of the program might have been twofold. It might have indeed been to weaponize space, but also, and I would say the primary objective would be to engage, to bait Russia, the Soviet Union, into an arms race, with the ultimate objective being to implode their economy. And it succeeded. That's exactly what happened. Russia, we were already engaged in a nuclear arms race, and so the Reagan administration, I think, had a very brilliant idea. Let's engage Russia. Let's bait them into a space arms race, because we knew that the Soviet Union would attempt to follow suit and would expend an enormous amount of resources trying to create their own space program, their own space-based weapons program, and effectively demolish their economy in the process. Very, very genius strategy by the Reagan administration, and it worked. It effectively brought the Soviet Union to ruin, financial ruin. It was one of the things that brought the Soviet Union to financial ruin. Now, the question is, did we actually launch the program? Did we actually begin to create a space-based weapons system? I think the answer is yes, we did. To varying degree, with varying degrees of success, I'm sure. And the other question I think that percolates in people's minds, certainly in mine, was Ronald Reagan's reference of an alien threat from outside this world. Did he make that reference because he had information, because he had been read into or briefed on the alien presence? Had we encountered extraterrestrial craft in outer space? I think the answer to that is yes. You all know what I think about the moon landing. I think we did land on the moon, but we discovered that we were not the first to do so, and our astronauts were being watched by a non-human presence, probably the Greys, who have bases on the moon. And so Reagan might have been read into this. He might have been briefed on this, and the government might have already been contemplating, the United States military specifically, already contemplating an engagement, a hostile engagement with this alien faction. So there might have been some truth to what Reagan was saying. Of course, the proponents of Project Bluebeam will say that this was Reagan signaling that the government at some point, or some globalist entity, was going to manufacture an alien threat in order to consolidate a one-world government. The so-called New World Order. That this fake alien invasion was going to be used to terrorize the people of the world and to consolidate power, again, in the form of a one-world government. So there's a number of ways to interpret Reagan's speech here. This excerpt from Reagan's speech, I think it's a clumsy metaphor, maybe based on some information that Reagan had actually received, that he had been briefed on the alien presence, and perhaps he was intentionally inserting this in here to signal to his Soviet counterparts that he knows about the alien presence, and maybe we should be thinking about defending the Earth together rather than being locked in the conflict of the Cold War. I suspect that may be true. The other thing that proponents of Project Bluebeam like to use as ammunition to prove their point, to bolster the notion that everything that we see about aliens is fake, we're just being prepped for a fake alien invasion, is, of course, the Wernher von Braun statement that was allegedly made by Braun before he died. In 1974, shortly before dying of cancer, Wernher von Braun told his associate, Dr. Carol Rosin, allegedly told his associate, Dr. Carol Rosin, that the Pentagon would use the, quote, alien threat as the last ploy of their 5-step program to arm space. The others were, number 1, the communist threat, number 2, a terrorist threat, number 3, rogue nations, number 4, asteroids, and then number 5, an alien threat. And this is very, very popular among proponents of Project Bluebeam. First of all, it's important to understand that this statement was alleged to have been made by Wernher von Braun on his deathbed, and only Carol Rosin was present to hear the statement. So there's no confirmation that Wernher von Braun ever actually made the statement outside of Carol Rosin. Okay, now that's not to say that I doubt it. I actually believe he did make this statement. But it's important to understand that the entire thing rests on one person's testimony. Also, I think we need to consider that this is, if indeed the statement was made by Wernher von Braun, that it could just be a matter of his own opinion. This could be just von Braun expressing his opinion that the Pentagon would ultimately use the alien threat as an excuse to arm space. And remember, we're within the context of arming space here. And this is, of course, again, referring back to the Star Wars program, which was initiated to combat the communist threat, i.e. the Soviet Union. So there is some truth here, for sure. Now, but von Braun, did he have inside information that this was on the table? He very well may have had that information. He was instrumental in NASA. Of course, he was heading up our rocket program. And yes, he was. Von Braun was brought over to the United States under Operation Paperclip. He was a Nazi, and he was one of the most instrumental scientists working on their rocket program. So our rocket program at NASA is essentially a Nazi rocket program. And there's a lot that can be said we can speculate in that direction all day long, and maybe I'll do a briefing on that, specifically on NASA and our rocket program and the Nazi scientists that we brought over who really formed the foundational level of NASA. There's no question that that's true. So, did Wernher von Braun actually say this? Probably. The question is he correct? Will this statement of his that the alien threat is going to be the last card that the Pentagon is going to play, in other words, a fake alien invasion, to complete this mission of arming space? Well, I have a problem with that right away, because nobody really is contending that we shouldn't arm space. I mean, we already have. Space is armed. We have nuclear warheads definitely orbiting the Earth. We've done this. We've done it decades ago. We did it decades ago. So we didn't need a terrorist threat, and that doesn't really make any sense, by the way. Why would we use the excuse of a terrorist threat to arm space? Nobody was talking about arming space after 9/11. That was not part of the conversation. Nobody was using that terrorist attack to make a case for arming space with nuclear warheads or something like this, or space-based energy weapons, high-energy weapons. Nobody was making that case. So that seems to have been a misfire in regard to von Braun's prediction. Rogue nations, number 3. Rogue nations. Nobody's making a argument that we need to arm space because of rogue nations. What does that even mean, rogue nations? Okay, so obviously the communist threat, yes. Number 1, von Braun's alleged first reason that we would excuse that we would use to arm space, the communist threat. Yes, obviously the Star Wars program. Yes, that's true. That happened. A terrorist threat? Nah. Rogue nations? No. Asteroids? I guess. I mean, I know NASA deployed a technology recently, space-based missile system, or they sent up a rocket with a warhead on it to try and divert an asteroid. Okay, big deal. But that's not being used as an excuse to arm space. All right, so, and then of course number 5, the alien threat. So understand that none of these so far, besides the communist threat, Soviet Union, none of these points have been used to aggressively contend for the arming of space. We've armed space, and big deal. People know we've armed space. It's not been this contentious debate. Okay. Now, von Braun obviously thought that it would be, assuming that this statement of his is true. He obviously thought that arming space would be, the idea of arming space would be hotly debated. It hasn't been. So the premise of von Braun's statement is wrong. And Blue Beam people need to understand that. The premise, the only point that von Braun got right was, number 1, the communist threat. None of these other things have been used to argue for arming space. Okay. Now, Blue Beam doesn't necessarily, the theory isn't necessarily that the Pentagon or whoever is going to use a fake alien, is going to manufacture a fake alien invasion so that we can have an excuse to arm space. As I've said, the main contention is that it's going to be used to simulate a false rapture, a false second coming, or, and this is the most important one, and most likely, in my opinion, to consolidate the nations into a global government. That is much more likely, obviously, than that's more likely of an objective. That's more plausible of an objective than arming space. Okay, so the idea of blue beam is, and this is evidence that people often cite that Project Blue Beam is going to happen. The idea is that we have been prepped for a fake alien invasion through popular culture, movies, TV shows, books, etc. Movies like Independence Day, TV shows like The Twilight Zone. So the idea is that we've been intentionally prepared for this fake alien invasion. And now, in a modern context, the proponents of Blue Beam will say that David Grush and all of the revelations that are coming out of the Pentagon and all of the whistleblower testimonies from David Fravor and others, this is all conditioning the public for this holographic fake alien invasion, or an alien invasion that uses a fake alien invasion that uses a combination of holographic technology and secret aerospace technology that we've developed over the years. A big proponent of this is Dr. Stephen Greer. Dr. Greer, his position is that the aliens are good and humans are bad. That's, in a nutshell, his position. And that the bad humans are going to stage a fake alien invasion in order to convince us that the aliens are evil, when in fact the aliens are good, they're our friends, they're our allies against the bad humans. That's Greer's position in a nutshell. I think that Greer is gravely mistaken, and is obviously being influenced by a very particular flavor of ufology. He's very much invested in a New Age belief system in which our benevolent space brothers are going to deliver us from the malevolent human forces that are at work in the world. I'll have some more commentary on that in a minute, but the point I want to highlight here is that a lot of people, and I would say a lot of people in our community, and I would say a lot of people who are interested in the UFO topic but are coming from a Christian worldview, a lot of people utilize the Project Blue Beam conspiracy as a convenient excuse to deny the reality of the alien presence. And this is what I most commonly encounter online, on social media. This is what's most apparent to me. Now, you have Greer's faction, which is a big faction of people influenced by Dr. Stephen Greer, who will cite Project Blue Beam. Indeed, Greer does cite Project Blue Beam. Will cite Project Blue Beam again to support the idea that our benevolent space brothers are going to be painted in a bad light through a fake alien invasion. That the population has to be convinced that the aliens are evil, so that the bad humans can accomplish their nefarious goals on Earth. So you have Greer's camp, but generally speaking, in my world, in my space, I encounter mostly Christians who are proponents of Blue Beam, Project Blue Beam, and whenever I post anything to do with aliens or UFOs, it doesn't matter what it is. It can be something David Grush said, it can be something Ross Coulthart is putting out there. Inevitably, invariably, somebody will literally just comment with two words, Blue Beam, or sometimes written as one word, Blue Beam. That's it, Blue Beam. Blue Beam is the end-all answer for these people in regard to the alien question, in regard to the UFO phenomenon. It is their broad brush explanation to this very complex phenomenon. Blue beam. End of story. Full stop. Blue beam. They feel satisfied with that explanation. They're very much satisfied with the notion that none of this is real. It's all contrived by the government, or it's all just sort of a satanic hoax. All of that is encompassed within this word, or within this term, blue beam. And what frustrates me about this is it's ignorant, because they are removing from the equation all of the data that has been accrued over the decades in regard to this phenomenon, the UFO phenomenon, that demonstrates unequivocally that there is an alien presence. There is a non-human factor here that must be accounted for, and that the non-human component is biological. It's not ethereal. It's not only ethereal. It's not just some supernatural or spiritual phenomenon. There is a biological component. There are bodies, there is technology, there are crashed craft that is being reverse engineered, bodies that are being studied. These entities die. There are physical altercations, and of course, the voluminous data concerning the abduction phenomenon. All of that is just waved away. All of that is just pushed aside with this magical, all-encompassing explanation, blue beam. And that frustrates me, as you can tell. It frustrates me because it is not helpful. People who cite blue beam do it with sort of an air of superiority, like, I've got this figured out. Blue beam, okay? Grush, blue beam. Tic-tac, blue beam. Gimbal, blue beam. Whatever. Everything's blue beam to these people. No matter what you come forth with. Pelacadas, the face peelers in Peru, blue beam. It's all blue beam to these people. And it's just so frustrating because they present this term, this terminology, this theory with an air of superiority and arrogance. Like, you're all just ignorant fools for believing any of this. Blue beam. That's the answer. I'm sorry, but that is exceedingly ignorant. It's exceedingly ignorant. And frankly, I'm exhausted. I'm fatigued with the blue beam thing. Now, having said all of that, let me now offer some support to Project Bluebeam in regard to its authenticity or potential validity. If you would like to watch the rest of this video, you can do so at the alberinoanalysis.com. Come join hundreds of other like-minded people who are engaging in these kinds of topics in my own personalized, troll-free social media platform, the alberinoanalysis.com.